My family texted, "We need distance from you, please stop contacting us completely." My uncle was the one who packed them up. I simply replied, "Course I'll cancel my direct deposits first thing and I just let you know." I stood there, staring at the message on my screen. The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't the first time they'd asked for space, but this felt different. There was no room for a conversation, no chance to explain, just an ultimatum. A simple sentence that felt like a door slamming shut. For years I had been the one holding everything together. The responsible one. The one everyone turned to when things got tough. My parents, my sister, even extended family, they all knew I'd be there with the help, the financial support, the solutions. It was always me. The problem solver, the steady one, the one who paid. I wasn't the perfect son or brother. I didn't have grand ambitions, or a life filled with excitement. But I had stability. I worked in peril at a medical facility, a job built on order and precision. The kind of job where things are always neatly in place, where everything has its purpose. My apartment was the same way: soft lighting, clean counters, receipts filed by color. Nothing flashy, nothing complicated, just stable. But stability came at a cost, it always did. My parents, Linda and Robert, had always prided themselves on family loyalty. They drilled it into me over the years: family comes first, no matter what. That's how they justified asking me for money, time, or favors. I never said no, how could I? They were my family. They needed me. And that's what family does, they help each other. Except it never stopped. It was never just one small thing. It was always more. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for my share. I stopped questioning when things didn't feel right. I just kept giving, kept doing, kept fixing. It was easier to do that than face the truth, that I was the one paying the price for their needs. And then came the text. The one that ended it all. It wasn't just the message itself, but the finality in it. The coldness. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for setting a boundary. I didn't feel sorry. I felt I was done. They wanted distance. I could give them that. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop holding everything together. Growing up, I learned early on that role in the family was clear. I was the one who took care of things. My mother, Linda, always reminded me that family helps family. She'd say it with a sigh, as if the words themselves held more weight than anything else. And my father, Robert, well, his version was more direct. Loyalty is duty, he would say. I didn't raise you to nickel and dime blood. There was always a lecture about how I should never let money get in the way of family. So, I didn't. I did what I had to do, always. When Nora needed money for rent, or when my parents couldn't cover the bills, it was me they turned to, no hesitation, no shame. Just the unspoken expectation that I'd pick up the slack. I didn't even question it at first. How could I? They were my family. They'd given me life, raised me, so what was a few $1,000s here and there? It wasn't always huge amounts, but it added up, slowly at first, then faster. Rent payments, medical bills, car repairs, groceries for them when things were tight. Every time it was framed as temporary. We'll pay you back, they said. But it never happened. The payments were always due again, and I was always there. When they asked, I said yes. When they needed help, I was the one who could always be counted on. Nora especially took it for granted. She was the younger one, the one who never seemed to understand the word no. Always the center of attention, always loud, always demanding. Banker girl. She called me, half in jest, half in manipulation. Whenever she needed something, a new jacket, a new phone, some money for something she couldn't afford, she'd joke about it, making it sound so casual, so harmless. Come on, banker girl, you know I can't do this alone. And I would help. Because how could I say no? It wasn't just Nora. My parents, Linda and Robert, would chime in too. They never asked directly, but I knew what they meant. You know how hard things have been, they'd say. Family looks after family. It was always the same, and I gave. Every time. I'd open my wallet, write the check, transfer the money, and act like it didn't bother me. Because that's what family did. They helped, they relied on each other. But there were moments, small, quiet moments, when I started to feel the weight of it all. It wasn't the money itself, but the way it was always expected. The way it was just assumed I'd take care of it. No one asked what I needed. No one asked if I could afford it. It wasn't about love. It was about duty. And I was the one who always had to carry that load. I remember one night, just a few weeks before the message came, sitting at my kitchen table. The receipt drawer was open in front of me, and I was going through it like I always did. Sorting out the payments, making sure everything was covered. Rent, utilities, medical, transportation, everything was categorized neatly by color. Green for rent, yellow for utilities, blue for transportation, and red for medical. It was all so orderly, so controlled. But the more I looked at it, the heavier it felt. I was holding up their lives. I was the one paying for everything. And for what? A thank you that never came. A promise to pay me back that never materialized. That night, I closed the drawer, but the weight stayed. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the realization that I had become the infrastructure of my family's existence. I was the one who kept things running. But I never got to be part of the life I was keeping alive. I was just a source of support. Nothing. That feeling sat with me for days, eating away at me until the text came. It wasn't the first time they'd asked for space. But this time, it felt different. There was no discussion, no attempt to explain. Just a cold, final sentence: we need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely. And just like that, it was over. I don't know why it hit me so hard. Maybe it was because it was so sudden, so final. Maybe it was because, for the first time, I realized that maybe I didn't owe them anything. Maybe I didn't need to carry their weight anymore. The days leading up to the text felt strange, in a way I couldn't quite put into words at the time. Small things that should have been nothing: comments from Nora, looks from my parents, settled under my skin like grit. At first, I thought it was just the usual family dynamics, the demands, the subtle guilt trips. But looking back now, I can see the signs. It wasn't just the normal push and pull anymore. Something was shifting. It started with Nora, as it always did. She showed up at my parents' place one evening, wearing a brand new coat, the tags still creased into the fabric, and immediately started talking about a safer apartment she was eyeing across the city. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. I knew what was coming next. "You'll cover the deposit, right?" she asked, scrolling through her phone like it was just another casual request. I looked at her, my hand still wrapped around my coffee mug, and said, "No." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was just a steady no. I'd practiced in my head for weeks. I'd said it before in smaller moments, but this time I meant it. The room fell silent for a moment. Nora didn't flinch. She didn't even seem surprised. But my mother Linda froze, her hand still holding the dish she was drying. My father Robert sucked in a slow breath, the kind he always took when he was disappointed. The kind that made my stomach tighten. Nora raised an eyebrow, like I had said something unexpected. "Come on, banker girl," she said, her voice casual, but there was that edge in it, the one that made it feel like a challenge. "It's not that deep." I stood up from the table. I didn't even say anything else. I just left. The car ride back home was quiet, the heater ticking in the background, the sound oddly comforting. But my mind was racing. Why did a simple boundary feel like a crime? Why did it feel like the entire world was turning against me just because I said no? I had done this for years. Paid for things I couldn't afford, covered expenses I had no business covering, always pretending that it was fine. I had convinced myself it was normal. That it was just the way things worked in families. But somewhere deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. And that night, the lie finally caught up with me. 2 days later, the call came. I answered the phone at work, using my calm, professional voice. But the voice on the other end was the last person I expected to hear. The landlord for my parents' apartment. "Hi Leva," he said cheerfully. "Just wanted to confirm that we've received your payment for the renewal. Oh, and I went ahead and reversed that late fee for you, no problem." I sat there stunned, the words not fully registering at first. "Late fee?" I asked, my voice coming out quieter than I meant it to. "Yeah, a late fee," he said like it was nothing. "Anyway, we're all set for the month. Your parents told me you'd be handling it from now on." I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just used my money, they had given the landlord my personal information. They'd shared my work email and schedule. Without asking. Without even telling me. "Thanks," I said, hanging up the phone. I stared at the blank wall in front of me, my breath shallow, my fingers shaking. I had always known my family was asking too much of me, but this felt like a betrayal. They hadn't just relied on me for money. They had crossed a line. They had taken my privacy, my autonomy, and turned it into another thing for me to manage. I walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and tried to calm my thoughts, but the truth was there, clear as day. My family wasn't just taking advantage of me. They were using me. And for the first time in years, I felt a cold, sinking realization. I didn't owe them anything. That evening, I drove straight to their apartment complex. The hallway smelled like cleaning solution and leftover takeout, the scent sickly familiar. I knocked on the door, and when they opened it I stepped inside, my voice steady, but my heart pounding. "I deserve to know what I'm paying for," I said. Linda's face hardened. "We don't feel attacked," she said, as if it were my fault. Robert crossed his arms, looking at me with disappointment. "Take that tone with your coworkers, not with us." "And Nora." She laughed from the hallway, her voice light, almost mocking. "Should we tip you now or later?" she called. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even loud. It was worse than that. It was casual cruelty delivered with the ease of muscle memory. I didn't finish my sentence. I turned and walked out, not saying another word. I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, letting the silence settle over me. For the first time, I felt like I was completely alone. I had always told myself that this was normal. That this was just the way families were. But now I wasn't so sure. I couldn't keep doing this. And I didn't know how much longer I could pretend. The days after that phone call felt like they lasted forever. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the landlord's cheerful voice in my head. "We've received your payment." It wasn't just the fact that he had called. It was the realization that my parents had given him my personal details without asking. Without even telling me. I had spent years thinking of myself as just the responsible one. The one who always took care of things. I was the steady hand, the one who paid the bills, the one who fixed things when they went wrong. But now I understood that my family hadn't seen me that way. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a tool. An endless supply of resources they could rely on without question. The worst part was how casually they had used me. How they never asked, never considered what it was doing to me. I wasn't even in the loop anymore. They'd been talking behind my back, planning how they could use me to cover their latest mess. They hadn't just borrowed from me. They had taken from me, used me. Without a second thought. I started to realize how much of my life had been tied up in their problems. How much of my happiness, my time, my plans had been sacrificed so they could keep going, so they could keep asking for more. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at them, but at myself. How had I let it go on this long? That afternoon, after I left my parents' apartment, I sat down at my kitchen table, the receipts still neatly organized in front of me. It was almost like I was waiting for something to happen, some moment of clarity to make it all make sense. But all I could see were the payments. The housing, the utilities, the car repairs, the medical bills, the things I'd paid for month after month. It wasn't even a matter of wanting to help anymore. It was a matter of obligation. They had made it my responsibility, and I had allowed it. I pulled out a stack of receipts, green for housing. I looked at them, one by one. Rent for their place, utilities for the house, the groceries I bought for them when they couldn't afford them. I could feel the weight of every single one. Every purchase, every transfer, every payment I'd made. It wasn't just money, it was my life, my energy, my time. And for what? So they could go on living as if everything was fine. I spread the receipts across the table, each category representing a piece of my life that I had handed over to them. Green for rent, yellow for utilities, blue for transportation, and red for medical. The categories looked like a map of every place I had abandoned myself so they could stay afloat. I sat there, staring at the piles of receipts, realizing for the first time how much I had lost. I had built a life for them, but I had never built one for myself. It wasn't love. It was dependence, and I had become the infrastructure that held up a house that never had room for me. I let out a slow breath. The thought didn't break me. It freed me. That night as I lay in bed, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was because I finally understood the truth. Maybe it was because, for the first time, I had seen clearly what was happening. I wasn't the one who had been loved. I had been the one who was used. And now, I was done. I knew what I had to do. The next time they came to me with a request, I wouldn't say yes. I wouldn't feel guilty. I would say no, and I would mean it. Because I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was done being the one who picked up the pieces. The message from my family had changed everything. It was the final straw, the line they had crossed. And now, I was the one in control. The phone rang just as I was about to leave for work. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick it up. It was the landlord again. The same cheerful voice like nothing had changed. "Hi, Levy. Just wanted to confirm we received your payment for the month, and I reversed the late fee for you, no problem. Thanks for handling that." I froze, the phone still pressed to my ear. Late fee. What was he talking about? I hadn't made any arrangements for a late fee. Then it hit me. The landlord was talking about my parents' rent, not mine. Wait, what late fee? I asked, my voice betraying me, sounding quieter than I meant. Oh, didn't you know? Your parents asked me to add a late fee, but I went ahead and took care of it, he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep calm. The anger began to rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. I had to stay composed. Thanks, Ed. I said, hanging up without another word. My hand shook as I set the phone down. I could feel the walls of my apartment closing in on me. My family had crossed a line. They had used my information, my contact details, my email. They had gone behind my back and had shared everything without even telling me. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't just the fact that they expected me to cover everything. It was the complete disregard for my privacy. They had used my name, my work details, as though I was just an extension of their lives, a tool to make their problems disappear. I was no longer a son, a brother. I was a resource. It was a betrayal, a violation of trust I didn't know I had left. That evening after work, I drove straight to their apartment complex. I had to confront them. I couldn't just sit back and let them keep doing this. When I arrived, the familiar smell of cleaning solution and takeout wafted through the hallway, a smell that used to comfort me. Now it felt suffocating. I knocked on their door, my stomach tight with nerves. When Robert opened the door, I walked right in without waiting for an invitation. He looked at me, his face tight with the familiar disappointment I'd come to expect. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady. I was done with the pleasantries. This wasn't a family discussion anymore. This was about control, and I was taking it back. What is it, Levy? Robert asked, crossing his arms. I turned to Linda, who was standing in the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I deserve to know what I've been paying for, I said. My voice was firm now. This was it. No more excuses. No more pretending I could fix everything. Linda's face hardened. "Wu feel attacked," she said, her voice cold. Robert's jaw tight. "Take that tone with your coworkers, not with us," he said. "And Nora." She didn't even bother to come into the room. Her voice drifted in from the hallway. "Should we tip you now or later?" She called out, mocking me. The words hit harder than I expected. I was done. There was no point in arguing with them anymore. They weren't listening. They never had. "I'm done," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned and walked out the door, clicking behind me. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I had no words left to say. No more justifications. No more guilt. I had given them everything I had: my money, my time, my peace of mind. And what had I gotten in return? A family that only took and never gave. A family that expected me to carry their weight while they walked away unburdened. The next morning, as I sat at my desk at work, the message came. The one I had been waiting for. The one that would finally end it all. The family group chat lit up with the cold words. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." I sat back in my chair and stared at the message. There was no anger, no regret, just a sharp clarity that cut through everything. This was it. This was the line. They had asked for distance. And I was going to give it to them. Completely. I was done being their lifeline. It was time to let go. The minutes after I read the text felt suspended in time. My finger hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The message was clear, cold, final. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." I stared at it for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was just a few seconds. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. For the first time in my life, I understood exactly what I needed to do. I had spent so many years trying to live up to their expectations, trying to fix everything for them. And now, they were telling me to stay away. It was a clean break, and they had made it. But I was the one who had finally seen through the illusion. It wasn't like I hadn't tried to set boundaries before, but they always found a way around them. A subtle guilt trip, an excuse. "You know how much we need you. You're the responsible one." They always made it sound like I was the one at fault, like it was my duty to sacrifice my own life for theirs. But now they had cut me off. Now, it was my turn. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and typed out my response. It was calm, detached. No emotion. Just the facts. "I'm honoring your request for distance. Here is a summary of the payments I've been making on your behalf. All of these will end on the dates circled. Please transfer the leases and accounts into your own names within the next 30 days. I attached the photos: green for housing, yellow for utilities, blue for transportation, red for medical, purple for everything else. Each one represented years of my life that I had poured into their problems, each category a reminder of how little I had kept for myself. I hit send. And then I added one last line, a simple statement, a declaration of my final boundary. "Of course I'll cancel my direct deposits first thing." For a moment, I sat there, waiting for the flood of responses. I imagined them seeing the message, their eyes darting across the numbers, the dates, the totals. I imagined the panic starting to settle in, the realization that the lifeline they had relied on for so long was about to be severed. I waited. For 2 minutes, nothing. Then the notification started. First from Mom. "Mave, what is this supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice frantic, as if she couldn't comprehend what I had done. "We meant distance from your attitude, not from you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. It wasn't about them anymore, it was about me. Dad followed. "Money is not the same as family," he wrote, the words laced with guilt, as always. "Don't weaponize it, Nora. You're sick. You did this to humiliate us." I sat there, my fingers itching to reply, but I didn't. I couldn't. They had to see this for what it was. They had to understand that I was done being their scapegoat. Then Nora. "I can't afford to move right now," she texted. "I'll be in a dangerous area. Are you happy if something happens to me?" I stared at the message, my mind racing, but my response was simple. "I hope you stay safe." I typed. "But I'm not responsible for your lifestyle." The silence that followed was heavy. Their manipulations, their guilt trips, they didn't work anymore. The silence stretched on, and it felt like freedom. The quiet of no longer caring whether they understood or not. But the silence didn't last. An hour later, the calls began. One from Mom, then Dad, then Nora. I didn't answer any of them. I let the calls ring out, the vibrations filling the space around me. It felt like they were trying to force their way back in, to take control again. I didn't let them. The final message came later that night, not in the group chat, but privately from Uncle Grant. "I'm dropping off a few boxes tonight," he wrote. "Stuff that belongs to you." I paused for a moment, unsure what to make of it. Belongs to me. I hadn't asked for anything to be returned. When he arrived, he was carrying 3 neatly stacked boxes. His jacket was dusty from moving furniture, and there was an air of quiet finality to his movements. "They tried to rush me," Grant said, setting the boxes down gently. "Told me not to bother with anything that wasn't theirs. But I saw your name on a few things." He didn't take sides. He didn't try to explain or make it right. He just dealt with the truth. And the truth hit harder than anything I had expected. I watched as he left, the boxes sitting on the floor in front of me. Inside were a few items: kitchen towels, a blender still in its packaging, a router they had never bothered to install. Things I had bought for them, things I had tried to make their lives easier with, things they had shoved aside, forgotten, still wrapped up like they never mattered. Grant didn't say anything else. He simply nodded and left, leaving me with the remnants of my past life. I opened the boxes slowly one by one, taking in the weight of what was inside. I had given everything, and this was all that was left. The silence of the empty apartment wrapped itself around me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally free. The next morning I woke up to a storm of missed messages. The group chat was blowing up. I had muted it the night before, but now, as the phone buzzed constantly, I couldn't help but check. It started with Nora. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering?" Her message was followed by my mother's. "You're being dramatic again." And then my father's, a message written in a long paragraph, all fury, no punctuation. "After everything we did for you growing up, this is the thanks we get. We trusted you with our bills because we thought you understood family better than this." I sat there reading it, the words echoing in my mind. They thought I owed them. They thought I was obligated to cover for them, to make their lives easier. And now they were trying to twist everything around to make me feel guilty. I didn't respond. Not then. I let it all sit there, all their anger, all their manipulation. It was the same old story, the same guilt trips they'd used on me for years. But something was different now. I had nothing to prove. I wasn't going to be their emotional punching bag anymore. The messages kept coming. Mom, Dad, Nora, each one trying a different angle. "If you stop paying the phone plan, how am I supposed to call work or get help?" Nora asked, her voice dripping with Fox concern. I didn't even flinch. I read the message, felt that old tug of guilt try to grab hold of me, but I pushed it away. I didn't respond to her, not with anything more than a brief, cold reply. "I'm not responsible for your lifestyle," I typed back, pressing send before I could second guess myself. Then silence. The kind of silence that filled the room so completely it almost felt like the walls were pressing in. I sat with it for a while, the phone in my hand, waiting for the next attack. But it didn't come, not immediately. I put the phone down, walked to the kitchen and made coffee. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to check every minute. The silence stretched. For once, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't holding my breath, bracing for the inevitable flood of demands. But it didn't last, the storm was just beginning. A few minutes later, the notifications started again. This time it was a private message from my mom. "You're dead to me," she wrote. The words weren't even shocking anymore. I had heard them all before, in 100 different forms. This one just had the sharpness of finality to it. I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't respond. Not this time. Instead, I placed the phone face down on the counter, the weight of it suddenly feeling so small. I couldn't care about their anger, their disappointment. They had made their choice. And now I was making mine. The silence lingered for hours. The messages slowed, and then finally stopped. When I checked again hours later, the chat had grown eerily quiet. No more calls, no more messages. Only a few desperate lines from my aunt and cousins. "Mave, how could you do this? We never expected this from you." I didn't even glance at them. I had no more to say. Later that evening, the final blow came. Another message from Mom, this time in a new thread. "If you do this, you're dead to me." The words sat there on the screen, and for a moment, I almost laughed. It wasn't that it didn't hurt, but that it didn't hurt the way it used to. I replied, and this time, my fingers didn't hesitate. "I'm sorry you feel that way." I typed, and that was it. I hit send. And that was the end of it. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need to hear their guilt trip anymore. I had made my stand. And this time, it felt like I had finally found my own voice. It wasn't just about cutting ties with them. It was about cutting off everything they had used to control me. I was done being their financial crutch. I was done being their emotional target. I was done. For the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of peace wash over me. The weight lifted. And this time, I didn't look back. The quiet that followed was almost suffocating. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with messages, notifications, or calls. It wasn't that I missed it, far from it, but the silence felt different. It wasn't just a lack of noise. It was the absence of all the pressure that had built up over the years. The constant pull from my family, their expectations, their demands. It was gone. I sat at my small kitchen table, the sunlight filtering through the window, casting soft shadows across the room. The stillness in the air felt strange but comforting. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for the next crisis. I didn't have to look over my shoulder, waiting for the next emotional bomb to drop. It was the kind of peace I had forgotten even existed. That afternoon, I opened the drawer where I had kept all the receipts. The ones I had spread out on the floor, one by one, all those months ago. I hadn't touched them since. But now, as I pulled them out again, it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about what I had spent or how much I had given. It was about what I had reclaimed. My time, my peace, my life. I thought about all the things I had let slide. All the pieces of myself I had given up in the name of family. And for the first time I could see it clearly. The only person who had ever really mattered in that equation was me. I pulled out the receipts one by one, looking at the categories, the totals, the months of my life I had spent trying to hold everything together. But this time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I felt a strange sense of relief, as if all the weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Later that week, I sat in Dr. Prya's office. She had been my therapist for years, but this time, there was something different in her eyes. She could see it too. "That you seem lighter," she said, her voice soft but knowing. I smiled a real smile. "I feel lighter," I said. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of everyone else's problems." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "That's what happens when you let go. It's not abandonment, Levy. It's self-preservation." Her words hit me in a way they never had before. I had spent so many years convincing myself that I was doing that by holding on to everyone else's burdens. But now I understood. I had been holding on to the wrong things. And letting go was the only way forward. By the time I left her office, my mind was clear. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. That evening, Elias came over. He didn't knock loudly, just tapped once and let himself in, the way someone does when they care enough to stay gentle. He brought takeout with him, the kind of simple comfort that felt just right. "I heard about the message," he said softly, his voice steady. "How are you doing?" I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to hide it or sugarcoat it. "I'm okay," I said, looking at him with a calm I hadn't known in years. "No, I'm more than okay. I'm free." He smiled then, that smile that made everything feel like it was going to be okay. "You should be proud of yourself," he said. "Not everyone can do what you did." I wasn't sure I had ever felt pride in my life. I had always felt like I was too busy fixing things to stop and feel anything. But now, I could feel it. I had taken back my life. And that was something worth being proud of. The days that followed were quieter, less complicated. I didn't check my phone every few minutes, waiting for a new message, a new call, a new crisis. I didn't live for the next emotional storm. Instead, I cooked dinner without wondering if someone would need something. I walked through the streets without glancing nervously at my phone. I made plans. I made space for myself. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to apologize for living my own life. I had spent so many years apologizing for things I never did, for things that weren't my responsibility. But that was over now. I had learned something important: love without respect isn't love at all, and boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. And if I ever doubted that, I could look at the peace that had finally settled over my life. Peace that felt more real than anything I had ever known before. I thought about the future, the life I was building for myself now, no longer defined by my family's needs or expectations. And for the first time I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready. And that was enough.